The Battle of Actium was not just another naval confrontation in the long history of ancient warfare. It was the final moment in a century of Roman civil wars, a single decisive clash that determined who would rule the Mediterranean world. From this battle emerged not a republic, not a coalition of generals, but an empire that would dominate Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East for centuries. To understand why Actium mattered so deeply, we must first understand Rome itself. For nearly 500 years, Rome had been a republic. Power was shared between elected officials, the Senate, and the people, at least in theory. But by the 1st century BCE, this system was collapsing under its own weight. Wealth from conquest had created massive inequality. Armies were loyal not to the state, but to individual generals who paid them. Political violence had become normal. Rome no longer feared foreign enemies. It feared itself. The chain of events leading to Actium began with the rise of Julius Caesar. Caesar's conquest of Gaul made him immensely popular with soldiers and citizens alike. When the Senate, led by Pompey the Great, ordered him to give up his command, Caesar chose civil war instead. His victory made him dictator, and for a brief moment it seemed that Rome might stabilize under a single ruler. That illusion ended in 44 BCE, when Caesar was assassinated in the Senate by a group of senators who claimed to be restoring the Republic. Instead, they unleashed chaos. In the power vacuum that followed Caesar's death, 3 men emerged as the strongest figures in Roman politics: Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus. Together, they formed the Second Triumvirate, an officially sanctioned alliance with absolute power to hunt Caesar's killers and restore order. Octavian was young, cold, and politically brilliant. He was Caesar's adopted heir, though he lacked military experience at first. Mark Antony was the opposite. He was a seasoned general, charismatic, impulsive, and immensely popular with soldiers. Lepidus, though powerful initially, would soon fade into the background. The triumvirate defeated Caesar's assassins at the Battle of Philippi. But once their common enemies were gone, cooperation turned into rivalry. Rome was divided. Octavian controlled the western provinces, including Italy and Gaul. Antony took the wealthy eastern territories, including Greece, Asia Minor, and Egypt. Lepidus was given Africa, though his influence steadily declined. At this point, the future of Rome depended on whether these men could share power. They could not. Mark Antony's destiny became inseparably tied to Egypt and its queen, Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was not merely a seductress, as later Roman propaganda would claim. She was one of the most intelligent and capable rulers of her time. She spoke multiple languages, commanded immense wealth, and ruled the last independent Hellenistic kingdom in the Mediterranean. Egypt's grain-fed Rome. Its treasury was vast beyond imagination. Antony met Cleopatra in 41 BCE. Their alliance was both political and personal. Cleopatra provided Antony with money, ships, and supplies. Antony offered military protection and legitimacy. But to Rome, this relationship was dangerous. Antony began spending more time in the East, adopting Eastern customs, ruling from Alexandria rather than Rome. He acknowledged children he had with Cleopatra. Most shocking of all, he publicly distributed Eastern territories to Cleopatra and their children in an event known as the Donations of Alexandria. To many Romans, this looked like treason. Octavian understood something crucial. He could not defeat Antony through force alone. Antony was still Rome's greatest general, but he could defeat him through public opinion. Octavian launched a ruthless propaganda campaign. He portrayed Antony as a traitor who had abandoned Roman values, fallen under the spell of a foreign queen, and planned to move the capital of Rome to Egypt. Cleopatra was painted not as a ruler, but as an exotic threat who sought to enslave Rome. The Senate was divided, but Octavian controlled Italy and the Roman heartland. He took a dramatic step. Instead of declaring war on Antony, which would appear as civil war, he declared war on Cleopatra. This was a masterstroke. By framing the conflict as Rome versus Egypt, Octavian transformed a Roman civil war into a foreign war. Antony was no longer a rival Roman general. He was the defender of a foreign queen against Rome. In 32 BCE, war was inevitable. Both sides began massive preparations. Antony and Cleopatra assembled a huge fleet in the eastern Mediterranean, drawing ships and troops from across the Hellenistic world. Their navy was large and heavily built, designed for ramming and boarding. Octavian, advised by his brilliant general Marcus Agrippa, focused on speed, discipline, and strategy. Agrippa reformed the fleet, emphasizing lighter, more maneuverable ships and highly trained crews. This difference would decide everything. By 31 BCE, the opposing forces converged near Actium, a promontory on the western coast of Greece. Antony's fleet was anchored in the Ambracian Gulf, protected by narrow entrances but vulnerable to blockade. Agrippa struck first. Rather than seeking immediate battle, Octavian's forces cut off Antony's supply lines. Agrippa captured key ports and disrupted reinforcements. Antony's army, stationed on land, began to suffer from disease, hunger, and declining morale. Antony faced a terrible choice. If he stayed, his forces would slowly collapse. If he attempted to break out, he risked total destruction. Cleopatra urged retreat. She wanted to preserve her fleet and return to Egypt, where she could still rule. Antony hesitated, torn between honor, strategy, and loyalty. Finally, he chose to fight his way out. On September 2, 31 BCE, the Battle of Actium began. The sea was calm. The sky was clear. Thousands of ships faced one, another in one of the largest naval battles in ancient history. Antony's fleet was massive but unwieldy. His ships were larger, heavier, and designed for close combat. Octavian's fleet, under Agrippa's command, was faster and more flexible. As the battle unfolded, Agrippa's tactics became clear. Instead of ramming head-on, his ships attacked from the sides, harassing Antony's fleet, cutting off smaller groups, and avoiding direct boarding where Antony's heavier ships had the advantage. The fighting was brutal and chaotic. Ships collided. Soldiers hurled javelins and fire. The sea was filled with smoke, blood, and wreckage. Then came the moment that sealed history. Cleopatra's squadron, positioned behind Antony's main force, suddenly raised sails and broke through the fighting. Cleopatra fled the battlefield, heading for Egypt. Why she did so remains debated. Some believe this was the plan all along. Others think she panicked. What matters is how Antony responded. When Antony saw Cleopatra's ships retreating, he made a catastrophic decision. He abandoned the battle. Leaving his fleet and army behind, Antony followed Cleopatra with a small group of ships. The rest of his forces, shocked and leaderless, soon collapsed. Some surrendered. Others were destroyed. The Battle of Actium was over. Octavian had won without annihilating his enemy completely, which was exactly what he wanted. He could now present himself not as a conqueror of Romans, but as the restorer of peace. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, their power broken. Over the next year, Octavian methodically closed in. In 30 BCE, he invaded Egypt. Antony, abandoned by his remaining supporters, committed suicide. Cleopatra followed shortly after, choosing death over humiliation. With their deaths, the last serious opposition to Octavian vanished. Rome stood at a crossroads. The Republic still existed in name. The Senate still met. Elections were still held. But everyone knew the truth. Power now belonged to one man. Octavian would soon take the name Augustus, becoming Rome's first emperor. He would claim not to have destroyed the Republic, but to have saved it. In reality, Actium had ended the Roman Republic forever. The Battle of Actium reshaped the ancient world. Egypt became a Roman province. The Mediterranean became a Roman lake. Centuries of imperial rule followed. And it all came down to one decision, one naval battle, and one moment of retreat. Augustus would rule for over 40 years, ushering in the Pax Romana a period of relative peace and stability that lasted 2 centuries. Roads, cities, laws, and institutions spread across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. But this peace came at a cost. Political freedom was gone. The Senate became ceremonial. Elections became meaningless. Opposition meant death. Rome had traded chaos for control, republic for empire. The legacy of Actium echoes far beyond ancient history. It teaches us that empires are not always born through conquest alone. Sometimes they are born through exhaustion, fear, and the promise of stability. The Roman Empire did not begin with a coronation. It began on a windswept sea, where one fleet fled, another held the line, and the fate of the ancient world was decided. Actium was not just a battle. It was the moment Rome chose empire over freedom. And history has never been the same.